The annual Northeast Retro Gaming event has been running for 10 years now. This two-day event is all about recreating the 1980s arcade and hosts a large selection of arcade cabinets and pinball machines, along with home consoles, vintage computers, retro game sellers, cosplay and merchandise. All the machines are available to play, with the arcade cabinets and pinball machines set to free play. Held in the sports hall of the Gateshead International Stadium, it is easily accessible by bus or metro, and has ample free parking if you wish to travel by car. The doors open at 10 AM each day, with plenty of time to play as many machines as you want until 4:30 PM. A fair play policy is in place, so if someone is waiting next to the machine you are on, you must let them play next once your current game is over. Going straight to the arcade cabinet area, you are met with the sights and unique sounds of a 1980s arcade, with each cabinet nicely presented with an illuminated banner, retro graphics, specific controls for the game, and a cathode ray tube displaying a mixture of 8-bit and 16-bit graphics. It was wonderful to pause for a moment to take in all this retro nostalgia. First up to play was Battlezone, a first-person shooter tank combat game. You control a tank using two sticks, which act as the steering, so if you keep the right stick on neutral and push the left one forward, you would start turning right. If you pull back on both sticks, you reverse, as you are putting power to both tracks, just like a real tank. The display is viewed through a periscope, another unique feature of this game. Looking at some gameplay from Battlezone will give you an idea of how the game plays. Released at the end of 1980 by Atari, the player controls a tank, which is attacked by other tanks, flying saucers and missiles. Using a small radar scanner at the top of the screen, you need to locate enemies that may not immediately be visible to you on this barren landscape, although it is possible to hide behind the various symmetrical objects to avoid enemy fire. Battlezone was considered to be the first true 3D arcade game with a first-person perspective using vector graphics. The periscope viewfinder limited the player's view, adding to the immersion of the game. However, action could still be seen by the spectators, who could look through the side windows of the viewfinder. Having played Battlezone frequently in the 1980s, I soon managed to get the cabinet's high score for the day. The next available cabinet was Centipede, again released by Atari in 1980. It features a trackball to control a small insect-like creature called a bug blaster. Firing small darts, you need to shoot the advancing segments of the centipede, along with other pests such as fleas, spiders and scorpions. As each dead centipede segment turns into a mushroom, the screen quickly gets full and has to be cleared to keep gameplay manageable. Galaga, published by Namco and released by Midway Manufacturing, was an enhanced Galaxian game that went on to become one of the most successful arcade games of the period. Controlling a starship, you have to destroy the Galaga forces, while avoiding enemies and projectiles. The enemy can capture your ship via a tractor beam, which can then be rescued, transforming you into a deadly dual fighter with additional firepower. Another trackball game is Missile Command, published by Atari in 1980. The objective of the game is simple. Defend your cities from the incoming missiles by shooting them down from one of your 3 missile launch sites. But be careful, you have limited missiles, so you have to make every shot count. Enemy missiles could destroy your cities as well as your missile launch sites. The game is over once all your cities have been destroyed. The following gameplay shows how you have to target the crosshair with the trackball in order to select where your anti-ballistic missile will detonate. You fire your missile from one of 3 missile launch sites using one of 3 dedicated fire buttons on the cabinet. Each ground site has only 10 missiles and cannot fire if it runs out of missiles or is destroyed by an enemy missile. So resource management of your anti-ballistic missiles is key to gaining a high score. The skill of missile command comes by judging the flight time of your own missiles and the ensuing explosion to take out as many enemy missiles with each shot. Later stages see an increase in the number and speed of enemy missiles, along with planes, satellites and smart missiles. This is a great game, and I achieved the cabinet's high score on my first try. In my head, all I could hear were the words, "Shall we play a game?" Defender is an iconic horizontal scrolling shooter developed by Williams in 1980. Piloting a spaceship, you must defend the astronauts on the planet's surface from the invading aliens. This is a frantic joystick game as you use your radar to track and shoot the aliens abducting your astronauts, with 5 additional buttons for left and right direction changes, laser fire, smart bombs and hyperspace. The symphony of sound effects is simply amazing. Moving to the left of Defender, I had to stop and look at the beautiful retro graphics on the side of the cabinet as I prepared to play another famous retro game, Galaxian. Published in 1979 by Namco in response to Space Invaders, this fixed shooter game has simple left and right joystick controls, along with a fire button for your starfighter. This is one of the first games to feature colour graphics and multicolored sprites on a scrolling background. The gameplay shows how the enemy formations appear above the starship Gallic, with the objective being to clear each round of aliens. There are 2 yellow Galaxian flagships in the formation worth 60 points, which increases to 300 points if charging. The red escort ships are worth 50 points each, again 100 if charging, with the other rows of Galaxians scoring lesser points. It should be worth noting that once your starship is fired, it cannot fire again until the missile either hits an alien or leaves the top of the screen. This can leave you vulnerable at times if your missile does not hit any targets once fired. If you manage to shoot the 2 red escort ships, followed by a yellow flagship that is charging, the bonus for this feat is increased to 800 points, and this also gives you a great feeling of satisfaction. Pac-Man, or originally called Puckman, is a maze action game produced by Namco in 1980. The objective is to eat all the dots in the maze while being chased by 4 ghosts, Blinky, Pinky, Inky and Clyde. Billy Mitchell was also attending the event, and over the years he has claimed numerous records on classic video games, including a perfect score of 3,333,360 points on the 256 screens available on Pac-Man. In 1985, Sega launched Hang-On, which had a set of motorcycle handlebars mounted on the cabinet with throttle and brake controls. It was one of the new generation 16-bit games that also had a dedicated soundtrack. Racing against the clock and other computer-controlled bikes to reach checkpoints to increase the time remaining. A deluxe version was also produced that used a full-size tilting motorbike to control the on-screen movement. Moving on from the arcade cabinet section, I came across 2 long rows of pinball machines. The sound was incredible. There were all types available to play, from old vintage pinballs to more up-to-date machines that were more complex than some of the arcade cabinets. I played on a number of these and had great fun bashing the flippers at the oncoming ball. It resulted in flashing lights and all sorts of noises being generated. There were numerous retro game sellers with a great selection of merchandise, including a good variety of retro games, all at reasonable prices. I spent a while looking through what was on offer. I also noted that some of the machines I'd been playing on were available to purchase at the end of the show. I was tempted, but unsure as to how I'd get a full-size arcade cabinet up into the retro attic Mancave. At the back of the hall was a huge selection of retro home consoles and vintage computers. There were a number of machines I had never actually seen, and others I had not viewed in a working condition for over 40 years. This was a more relaxed area for retro enthusiasts to sit down and chill out with some of their favourite games. After getting my bearings, I headed over to the vintage computer section for some 8-bit fun. I had to make sure that they had a Sinclair ZX Spectrum on display, and there it was, in all its 48K rubber key wonder. I have a couple of these 8-bit home computers in the retro attic Mancave, so there was no real need to sit down and play a few games, although I was pleased this humble little machine was present at the show and being played and enjoyed by all the attendees. Sitting next to the Sinclair ZX Spectrum was what I call an Amstrad Plus 2, following the purchase of the Sinclair brand in 1986. I was not going to bother with this machine, but then I noticed it was playing one of my favourite games, Manic Miner. Well, it would be rude not to sit down for a quick game, or at least finish the first screen, the central cavern, before moving on to the other 8-bit machines on offer. Manic Miner was the first game in the Miner Willy series, a platform game written for the ZX Spectrum by the famous Matthew Smith, and published by Bug-Byte Software in 1983. There are 20 caverns in total, the central cavern being the first. Each screen has a number of flashing objects that the player must collect to move on to the next cavern before Willy's oxygen supply runs out. The player must avoid the various enemies which move along predefined paths at a constant speed. Willy can also be killed if he falls too far or runs out of oxygen. Players must time the position of their jumps and other movements to complete each level. It is amazing that this game fits into 48K, along with in-game music called In the Hall of the Mountain King. A more expensive but direct competitor to the ZX Spectrum in the UK market was the Commodore C64, released in 1982. This 8-bit machine is still the highest-selling computer model of all time, and was a successor to the popular VIC-20. Based around the 6510 microprocessor with excellent sound capabilities using the 6581 SID chip, all packaged in the famous bread bin case, it still commands a large loyal fan base. There was also a BBC Micro on display. I had not seen one of these since school. The machine was designed and built by Acorn Computers, which was part of the BBC Computer Literacy project in the 1980s. It was accompanied by a television series called The Computer Programme. It was loaded with a game called Chucky Egg, produced by A&F Software. I've only ever played this game on a ZX Spectrum, but it looked great on this machine. Time to move on to a few retro home consoles. The first one I owned was the original Xbox, released by Microsoft in 2001. I remember purchasing this console because of two games only available on the platform: Halo featuring Master Chief and Project Gotham Racing. This example had Burnout 3 loaded, which showcased the next level graphics and sound for the period. And come on, who hasn't played Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball? Another console that caught my eye was a Spectrum Vega Plus that provides you with a modern, simple alternative to purchasing a retro computer. It came preloaded with 1000 games and also featured a micro SD card that you could use to download games from the internet and then load onto the console. It was funded by a crowdfunding campaign, which I backed at the time, and is a novel addition to any 8-bit retro collection. This show was excellent, the retro gaming equivalent of an all-you-can-eat buffet. There was just time to say goodbye to Bumblebee, one of the cosplayers in attendance, before leaving the event. If you enjoyed this video, why not leave a comment? And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for similar content from the Retro Attic Man Cave.